Albert, imagine you have been at your company for 2 years. You are good at your job. Your manager knows you are good at your job. Your colleagues know you are good at your job.
Okay, I like this version of me.
And there is a promotion, and it does not go to you. It goes to someone who has been there for 18 months, someone you consider, honestly, privately, to be slightly less technically capable than you.
This is now a less comfortable version of me.
And when you think about why, when you really sit with it, you realize it is not about the work. It is about the room, about who sounds senior in a meeting, about who emails the leadership team in a way that makes them feel confident, about who presents an idea and has people lean forward rather than glance at their phones.
Language.
Language. Specifically, the kind of professional English that nobody put in a textbook, the kind that operates in negotiations, in difficult conversations, in cross-cultural teams, in the emails that either build your reputation or quietly damage it.
The work-ready professional shift. And this is a massive topic right now. In 2026, with micro-credentials, with companies spending on short, intense training for exactly these skills.
Because organizations have figured out that you can hire someone technically brilliant and lose enormous value because they cannot communicate that brilliance effectively in high-stakes situations.
Which is a problem that English learners in professional environments face at an even higher level, because you are doing the technical work and the language work simultaneously.
Simultaneously, under pressure, in real time.
That is actually remarkable when you think about it.
It is, and that is exactly why this episode exists. I'm Mary.
I'm Albert. LeapTalk English, B2 level, real conversation. Today, the English that actually gets you promoted. We are going through meetings, negotiation, intercultural communication, and email, real phrases, real situations, and a word tour at the end. Stay for that.
Quick comment question before we start. What is your most stressful English situation at work? One sentence. Tell us. We want to know.
Okay, let's get into it. So Mary, let's start with meetings, because I think that is where most people feel the gap most acutely.
Yes, and I want to say something at the start that I think reframes the whole thing. Being good in a meeting in English is not about having better ideas than everyone else in the room.
Right, because plenty of people with excellent ideas say almost nothing in meetings.
And plenty of people with average ideas completely own the room. And the difference, almost entirely, is language. Specifically, knowing the phrases that signal authority, signal that you have been listening, signal that your contribution is worth attending to before you have even said what it is.
So give me an example. Give me the actual phrases.
Okay, situation. A meeting has been going for 20 minutes. Several people have spoken. You have not spoken yet, but you want to enter. What do you say?
Most people just say the thing. I think we should do X.
Which is fine, but watch what happens when you frame it differently. Building on what's been said, I think there's an angle here we haven't fully explored yet.
Immediately feels more senior.
Because it does two things. It shows you have been listening to the whole conversation, not just waiting for your turn. And it frames your contribution as an addition to a collective conversation, rather than just your individual opinion. So you are positioning yourself as someone who thinks about the room, not just about their own point. Exactly. And senior people, decision makers, they do this automatically. They always connect what they are about to say to what has already happened in the conversation. It creates a sense of coherence, of someone who is tracking the whole discussion.
What are some other entry phrases like that?
I want to come back to something David said earlier, because I think it connects to what we're trying to solve here. That one is powerful because you are naming a colleague, which shows you are paying attention, and you are creating a thread, a connection, which signals analytical thinking.
Or, if I can add a slightly different perspective, which is a softer entry, good when you are about to say something that goes against the flow of the conversation.
Yes, that phrase is doing important work. If I can add is an invitation, not a statement. It is polite, but it is also confident. You are not asking permission. You are signaling that what follows is worth hearing.
Okay, so we've got entry phrases. What about when we want to disagree? Because that is the hardest one. In my experience, disagreeing in English, especially in professional settings, is where everything can go wrong.
It can, and the reason it goes wrong is that a lot of people either go too direct, no, I don't agree with that, which creates unnecessary friction.
Or too indirect. They basically agree when they don't because they don't want the conflict.
And neither of those serves you. The direct one damages the relationship. The indirect one damages your credibility because you end up agreeing with things you don't believe.
So what is the third option?
The acknowledgement and redirect. 2 parts. First, you genuinely credit something in what the other person said. Not "that's a great point" as an empty phrase. Something specific.
Because people feel the difference between real acknowledgement and a placeholder.
They do. And then second, you redirect. You introduce your different position with a connector that signals a different direction without signaling conflict. Like, "I think you're right that speed is important here. Where I'd want us to think carefully is whether this particular approach actually gives us speed. My concern is there's a bottleneck we haven't accounted for."
So you've agreed on the value, speed matters, but you're questioning the method.
Which is a much harder position to dismiss than just "I disagree," because you've shown you understand what the other person cares about before saying you see it differently.
Can you give me a few more of those redirect connectors? Because I think that is where the language is really specific.
Yes, that framing makes sense. Where I'd push back slightly is, "I take your point about X. I suppose my question is whether that's useful. The thing I'd want us to stress test is..." Stress test. That is a great phrase by itself. It is. And it's worth pointing out that using specific professional vocabulary, stress test, bottleneck, flag, pressure test, sense check, signals that you are fluent in the language of the professional environment, not just English in general, the specific dialect of your industry.
Which is actually a form of credibility. You are demonstrating that you belong in the conversation.
Exactly. Micro vocabulary. The short, specific words that your industry uses that not everyone knows. Learning them and using them naturally is one of the fastest ways to shift how senior you sound.
Okay, I want to do a quick practice here. Mary, I am going to make a statement in a meeting, a simple one, and you give me the upgraded professional English version.
Let's do it.
Okay, I don't think this plan is going to work. Upgraded. I want to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success here. There are a couple of assumptions in this plan I'd like to walk through before we commit, because I think they carry some risk we should be eyes open about.
Completely different impression.
Same meaning, different register. The first one sounds like you are being negative. The second one sounds like you are being responsible.
Next one, we need more time.
I want to make sure we're making this decision with the right information. I'd feel much more confident if we could get X in front of us before we close this out. Can we revisit in 2 days?
Notice, she did not just say we need more time. She explained why more time produces a better outcome, and she gave a specific time frame, 2 days rather than some more time.
Because vague is always weaker than specific in professional communication. Specific signals that you have thought about it. Vague signals that you haven't.
One more. I have a question.
I want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. Can I just check my reading of this?
So simple, and yet the difference in how it feels. I have a question sounds like a student in a classroom. Can I just check my reading of this? Sounds like a peer in a professional conversation.
And the phrases are almost the same length. It is not more complicated. It is just tuned to the right frequency.
Okay, negotiation. Because this is the one that I think people really underestimate how much language matters.
It is enormous. And the biggest single mistake I see, and this is not just a non-native speaker thing, this is a universal mistake, is leading with a position.
Meaning stating what you want before you understand what the other person needs.
Yes, I need a 15% raise and I want to move to a senior title. You have just told the other person your exact target. You have given them a fixed point to respond to, and now the conversation is binary. Yes or no, maybe a small compromise.
Whereas if you start differently,
If you start with questions, before we get into specifics, I'd love to understand what the priorities look like from your side. You gather information. You find out what the other person actually cares about, and very often what they care about is slightly different from what you assumed.
which creates room that you would not have found if you had come in with your position first.
There is also a specific phrase structure in negotiation English that is one of the most useful things you can learn. Albert, do you know what a conditional offer is?
Tell me.
If you were able to move on the timeline, we might be in a position to look at the overall package differently.
So I am offering something, but I am not committing to anything yet.
Exactly. The if and the might do a lot of work. They signal willingness to move without locking you in. They keep the conversation open. They say, there is a deal here, we just need to find the shape of it.
And the other person can respond with their own conditional. If you're flexible on X, we could potentially look at Y.
And suddenly, you are problem solving together instead of trading positions. The energy of the whole conversation shifts.
Give me more conditional offer phrases because I want to feel how they work.
Should the scope shift in the direction you're describing, there's flexibility on our side around delivery. If we can agree on the principle today, I'm confident we can work out the details in a way that works for both of us. I think we're closer than it looks. If you can give me a little movement on timing, I can take something back to my team on the investment side.
That last one, I think we're closer than it looks. That is doing something interesting. It is reframing the whole negotiation as something almost resolved rather than something stuck.
Which shifts the psychology of the room. Instead of we are in a disagreement, it becomes we are almost at an agreement. And that small shift in frame very often makes people more willing to move.
Language shaping reality.
Language shaping how people feel about reality, which is the same thing in practice.
Okay, I want to do something a bit different here. A mini role play. I'm going to be a manager. You are asking me for a promotion. Go.
Okay, thanks for making time. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Before I share where I'm hoping to land, I'd love to get your read on how the last 6 months have looked from your side, because I want to make sure I'm addressing the things that matter most to you.
Sure. Honestly, I've been really pleased with your work on the Henderson account. I think there are still some areas where I'd like to see you grow into a more senior presence in client meetings.
That's really useful to hear, and I actually want to come to that because it connects to what I'm hoping to discuss. The Henderson account has given me a lot of opportunity to develop that muscle. I'd like to talk about what a senior title would look like, and whether we could use the next quarter as a way to formally demonstrate what I've already been doing. Does that feel like a reasonable conversation to have?
Okay, a few things I noticed there. She did not lead with the ask. She led with curiosity about my perspective. She took the challenge I raised and turned it into evidence. I've been developing that muscle rather than getting defensive. And she ended with a question that moved the conversation forward without forcing a yes or no.
Does that feel like a reasonable conversation to have is one of my favorite phrases in professional English, by the way, because almost no one says no to that. It is not, can I have a promotion? It is, can we talk about this topic? The threshold is so low that it almost always gets a yes, and then you are already in the conversation.
Opening the door rather than trying to walk through it all at once.
Exactly.
Okay, intercultural communication. This is the one that I think surprises people the most because they think, I speak English well, I understand what is being said, what else is there?
And the answer is a lot, because language carries culture inside it, and professional English, especially British and American professional English, has cultural norms that are so embedded in the language that they are almost invisible to native speakers. Give me the most important one to know: indirectness. British professional English in particular is famously, almost aggressively indirect in ways that confuse everyone, and I mean everyone, including Americans, including Australians, including people who have been speaking English their whole lives but not British English. So give me the decoder. When a British professional says, that's quite an interesting approach, what they mean is, I have serious concerns about this. Quite interesting means bad. In British professional context, often yes. Quite in British English is a softener that reduces, not increases. That's quite good means it is acceptable but not impressive. That is genuinely counterintuitive. It is. We might want to think about whether this is the right moment, means I think this is the wrong moment. There are 1 or 2 things I'd want to flag, means there are significant problems here. I'm not sure this is quite working yet, means this needs to be substantially rethought. So if you are in a meeting with British colleagues and you take everything at face value, you could leave thinking things are fine when they are actually not. Absolutely. And the reverse is also true. You might think someone is harshly criticizing your work when they are actually just raising a small concern, because in your cultural context, that level of directness would mean something much stronger. So how do you develop this skill? Because you can't just memorize a decoder list. 2 things. 1, exposure. Real contextual exposure to how these phrases are actually used, not in textbooks, but in real professional settings. Pay attention to what comes after someone says something softened. Notice the pattern between the soft phrase and the actual concern that follows.
And 2.
Ask. In contexts where you have a trusted colleague or manager, ask them to be explicit. When you said you had 1 or 2 things to flag, how serious were those concerns on a scale of urgency? Most people, when asked directly, will be direct. The indirectness is not a desire to hide things. It is a social convention. Remove the convention and the directness is often there.
There is also the other direction, right? The risk of being perceived as too direct in a culture that values indirectness. This is huge. If you come from a communication culture where directness is a sign of respect, where saying clearly what you think shows that you take someone seriously, and you bring that directness into a British or certain American corporate environment, you can be perceived as blunt, aggressive, or socially unaware.
Even though you are being respectful by your own cultural norms.
Exactly. The work here is not to become someone else. It is to develop the ability to read the room and adjust, to have a range,
to be able to operate in multiple registers so that you are choosing how direct to be rather than defaulting to one setting regardless of context.
That is actually a sophisticated skill even for native speakers.
It is, and developing it is part of what the shift to work-ready professional English means. It is not just grammar, it is not just vocabulary, it is social and cultural intelligence expressed through language choices.
Email. Let's do email because I know this is something a lot of people really want specific help with.
Okay, 3 principles, the ones that make the biggest difference.
First one.
Your opening line is not small talk, it is your first impression. Hope this email finds you well is so common it is basically invisible now. The reader skips it automatically, which means your email effectively starts with the second line, often a request or an agenda item with no relational warmth at all.
So what do you do instead?
You open with something specific, something that connects to the actual conversation or relationship. Following up on our call last week, I've had a chance to think through the points you raised, and I wanted to share where I've landed. That opening tells the reader 3 things. You were paying attention on the call, you did some thinking after it, and this email is a direct continuation of a real conversation.
So it feels personal, not like a form letter.
Exactly. Or, I saw the announcement this morning about the team restructure. I imagine this shifts some of the priorities we discussed. Wanted to check in and make sure we're aligned on next steps. That one requires you to have actually been paying attention to what is happening in their world, which signals investment in the relationship.
Second principle.
Subject lines. Most people treat them as labels. Follow up from meeting. Question about project. These are labels. They describe the email, but they do not tell the reader what to do or how urgent it is.
High register subject lines are different.
They tell the reader exactly what the email contains and what is expected of them. Proposal attached, would value your thoughts by Thursday. Action needed, confirming the March 12th deadline. Quick question on the Henderson brief, 2 minutes to answer, no urgency.
That last one, 2 minutes to answer, no urgency, that is actually fascinating because you are managing the reader's anxiety before they open the email.
Which means they are more likely to open it promptly rather than leaving it because they think it might be a complicated conversation they do not have time for.
You are removing the friction before they encounter it.
Professional email is partly about reducing the cognitive load of the reader. Every piece of information you can give them in the subject line, how long this will take, whether it is urgent, what you need from them, is a sign of professional consideration.
Third principle.
Tone matching. Every email has a register: formal, professional, warm, collegial, close. And the mistake most non-native speakers make is defaulting to one register regardless of who they are writing to.
Slightly too formal for people they should be warm with, occasionally too casual with people who expect formality.
And both of those create a slight wrongness that the reader feels even if they cannot name it. The way to develop this skill is to read the emails you receive and pay attention to the register. If your manager writes to you in casual language, short sentences, contractions, maybe a joke, and you write back in formal professional English, there is a mismatch. You are not wrong, but you are signaling something: distance, formality, uncertainty about the relationship that may not be what you intend.
So the rule is read what they sent to you and mirror the register slightly. Not exactly. You should always be slightly more formal than the most senior person in the conversation, but close.
Close. And over time, as you develop sensitivity to register, you will start to feel which level is right for each relationship, rather than having to think about it consciously.
Which is the goal, right? Automatic rather than deliberate.
That is always the goal.
I want to talk briefly about something you mentioned at the start, micro-credentials, because this is a real trend, and I think it's worth understanding why it has exploded in 2026.
It has exploded because organizations have figured out what we have been talking about this entire episode, that the gap between general English proficiency and high-stakes professional communication is a real, specific, measurable gap, and it can be closed with targeted training.
Short, intense, specific.
Not a 6-month English course, a 5-hour workshop on leading meetings in English, a structured session specifically on negotiation language, a focused program on email for professional credibility.
And the research behind micro-credentials shows that this kind of concentrated contextual learning produces faster results than broad exposure for professionals.
Because you are not learning English in general. You are learning the specific 20 phrases that operate in the specific 10 situations that actually determine your professional trajectory.
Which is essentially what we are doing in this episode, on a smaller scale.
On a much smaller scale. But the principle is the same: targeted, contextual, practical.
And for the listeners, if your company offers micro-credential training on professional communication, take it. If it does not, advocate for it, because the return is real and it is faster than most people expect.
the investment in learning the right 10 phrases for a negotiation or a difficult email conversation, that is not a small thing. Those 10 phrases will operate in your career for 20 years.
Worth more than almost anything else you could spend the same amount of time on.
First word, leverage. As a noun, leverage is the ability to influence a situation or someone's decisions, having something that gives you power or advantage in a conversation or negotiation.
For example, she used the competing offer as leverage in her salary negotiation. Not aggressively, but she made sure her manager knew it existed. Or, understanding what the other party actually needs gives you far more leverage than simply knowing what you want. Repeat, leverage.
Leverage.
Next, register. We have used this word before, but it is worth repeating here in the professional context. Register means the level of formality and style you use depending on who you are talking to and why. Professional register is different from casual register, even when the topic is the same.
For example, she had excellent English, but her register was always slightly too formal. It made people feel like she was writing to a stranger, even when they had known each other for years. Or, reading the register of a room, knowing whether to be direct or soft, warm or professional, is one of the most valuable skills in any workplace. Repeat, register.
Register. Next, stakeholder. A stakeholder is any person who has an interest in or is affected by a decision, project, or organization, people whose perspective and buy-in matter to the outcome. For example, before we present this proposal, we need to make sure we understand what each stakeholder actually cares about. They don't all want the same thing. Or, one of the most common mistakes in professional communication is writing or speaking as if there is one audience, when actually there are 3 different stakeholders in the room with 3 different priorities. Repeat, stakeholder.
Stakeholder.
Next, assertive. Assertive means confident and direct in stating your views or needs, without being aggressive or passive. Assertive is the professional ideal between the 2 extremes.
For example, the goal in negotiation is to be assertive, clear about what you need and why, without being combative about how you say it. Or, she was assertive in the meeting without being aggressive. She disagreed clearly, but made sure the other person felt heard first. Repeat, assertive.
Assertive. Next, align. To align means to bring things into agreement or to make sure different people or departments share the same understanding and direction. Are we aligned is one of the most common professional English phrases. For example, before the client presentation, we need to align internally on what we're actually recommending. We cannot walk in with 3 different answers. Or, I wanted to check in and make sure we're aligned on priorities after the restructure announcement. Repeat, align.
Align.
Next, deliverable. A deliverable is a specific output or result that is expected from a project or task, something concrete that can be produced and handed over.
For example, at the end of the meeting, always confirm the deliverables. Who is doing what, by when, to what standard. Or, she was very strong at the conceptual stage but struggled with deliverables. The ideas were excellent, but the outputs were always late. Repeat, deliverable.
Deliverable. Next, navigate. To navigate something professionally means to deal with a complex or difficult situation skillfully, finding a path through it without causing unnecessary damage. For example, navigating a salary conversation with a manager who is resistant requires patience, preparation, and the right language. Or, she was excellent at navigating difficult client relationships. She always knew when to push and when to wait. Repeat, navigate.
Navigate.
And our final word, pitch. As a noun and a verb, a pitch is a persuasive presentation of an idea, product, or proposal, usually short, high-impact, designed to get a decision-maker interested enough to take the next step.
For example, his pitch was technically excellent but too long. By the time he got to the ask, the room had mentally moved on. Or, the micro-credential course on pitching in English was the most useful professional development she had done in 3 years. It changed completely how she opened and closed important presentations. Repeat, pitch. Pitch. 8 words today: leverage, register, stakeholder, assertive, align, deliverable, navigate, pitch. And every single one of those words operates in exactly the situations we talked about today.
Learning these words is not just vocabulary, it is fluency in the language of professional environments. Using them naturally signals that you belong in the conversation.
Small challenge before we close. Think about one high-stakes communication situation you have coming up in the next 2 weeks. A meeting, an email, a conversation with a manager, and pick one phrase from today, just one, that you are going to deliberately use in that situation.
One phrase, used once, consciously. That is the starting point.
Because professional communication development is not about learning everything at once. It is about adding one thing, making it yours, and then adding the next.
And eventually, the phrases that used to require conscious effort become automatic, and you are the person in the room who sounds senior without trying.
Which is exactly where we want you to be.
I'm Albert.
I'm Mary. Thank you for listening and for practicing. See you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.